Morning, everybody. Bonjour à tout le monde. Ça me fait plaisir d'être ici de la part du Centre pour les compétences futures. I'm pleased to be here on behalf of the Future Skills Center to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing on digital tools and talk a little bit about why this issue is important to us at the Future Skills Center. I'm going to go on for about, hopefully just not more than about 5 or 6 minutes, and then if there's questions and that kind of thing, we can deal with them. Nous aurons l'opportunité de poser et d'avoir une discussion en français pour les francophones, ceux qui parlent français, donc ça me fait plaisir de répondre aux questions dans les deux langues. So the Future Skills Center has been working on this issue over the past few years through the various projects that it's been supporting across Canada. And we're working in a number of different areas related to digital tools and career guidance, as well as skills training. For sure, there's a lot going on with advancements in technologies related to this area and the way many services are delivered, including career information and guidance. We see all sorts of digital tools that are being developed to support the dissemination of labor market information and skill data, proliferation of many different types of learning management platforms, so ways of delivering online learning and also managing that learning, so organizing your learning in different courses or different credentials. There's technologies that are improving and facilitating matches between employers and job seekers, online tools that empower workers and career development professionals, and through all these tools is potential to improve access to new or underserved populations and people in remote areas. I should say that the Future Skills Center is concerned with technology in a number of different ways, not just in terms of the online tools, but more broadly, we're looking at the labor market and skills impacts of people being displaced by technology, as well as the need to keep people's digital skills up to date and to deal with the challenges that companies, particularly small firms, are having in terms of keeping up with technology and being able to adapt technology and adopt technology and ensure that employees in those companies have the skills to be able to integrate those technologies, because it's a very important question related to productivity. We're also concerned about what the impact of all this technological change is on the quality of work, the type of work that people do, the working conditions they work in, and how those are impacted by technology. And then, of course, we're concerned with technology in terms of its use as a tool to help people find better jobs, to manage their careers, to upskill, and reskill. So this is the area that we cover, and this is how we frame the issue for ourselves. And we're supporting numerous different programs across the country and projects with different partners. Just for those of you who I'm not sure, don't want to assume what everybody knows about this area, but when we talk about digital tools, we cover a lot of different things, some of which I've mentioned before. So digital tools are being used currently and increasingly to manage synchronous or asynchronous learning. So learning when you're in the presence of a live instructor with a live classroom, or when you're doing self-directed learning on your own. One-on-one counseling, like with a career counselor. Obviously, there's been a lot of, since the pandemic, a lot of people have had to move online and deliver services that they were used to delivering face-to-face. It's not the same thing, as we all know, just like it's not the same thing having a meeting here today. So there's a lot of things that have been learned in the last few years during the pandemic and in the wake of the pandemic, and still trying to take stock a little bit about how we do these kinds of online engagements with clients or with people that we're serving or colleagues and that kind of thing better. So a lot of this is impacting currently the career development community and how they've been working with people. Learning management systems, like I said, there's a lot of growth in this area, so much it's hard to keep track of and keep track of what these different learning management systems are doing. Some of you maybe use learning management systems for your own professional training. A lot of attention being paid to skills assessment. So digital tools, the role of digital tools in assessing people's skills and identifying their skills gaps. We see a lot of potential in terms of being able to use certain technologies to better assess people's skills so that they can get just the right training that they need to upskill or reskill for a new job, rather than going into a year-long training program. Perhaps there's shorter options that are available to them if we can better target that training to their needs. Labor market information, an obvious one, and then job and skills matching. And behind all of that, I think, as you probably all know, we're dealing with, or still thinking through and trying to assess what the impact of artificial intelligence is in all of these areas. I remember having a conversation with some at a career development conference last year when we were talking about, there was a lot of concern about what displacement would be caused by artificial intelligence, but I heard a lot about from career development professionals about how they were hoping that the AI tools would help them to save on certain routine and repetitive tasks of their work so that they could in fact invest more time in their one-on-one contact with clients. So it's AI both has a lot of promises a lot of disruption and potential displacement for people, but also promises to enhance the quality of services that people like career development counselors can provide. So essentially we're testing through the projects that we fund a number of different tools and technologies that impact the skills development ecosystem. And what we're concerned with now as we test through these things with our partners is to see which of these tools are sustainable. In other words, we've been piloting all sorts of stuff. There's all sorts of systems being piloted out there, but what does it take to really integrate them, make them permanent and sustainable and self-sustaining so that they keep getting used and the resources for them are available. We want to make sure that people who use these technologies as service providers have the right skill sets, because it does require digital skills, which not all service providers who have to adopt these technologies have. So there's a skill issue on the side of the users or the clients being served, but also in terms of the professionals who are using these technologies in their practices. And there's big concerns about creating barriers to access and seeing who is being excluded from the benefits of these technologies, what kind of gaps and inequities are being opened up. What we're learning, so this is just a very brief, there's numerous projects that we're supporting, so I'm going to just share in the last 2 or 3 minutes a couple of findings or some of what we're learning or in the process of learning. These projects haven't all concluded, so these are interim kind of findings from our experience. For sure, we're seeing that that properly implemented, these sort of digital tools that I've been talking about certainly enhance people's access to learning opportunities, skills assessment, career advice. There's huge potential in reaching people in rural and remote areas who don't necessarily have the same range of options to them open. And also certain people who, for different reasons, aren't able to go on site for somewhere to go for training or for career development advice or to work with a career counselor, single parents, persons with disabilities. So these mobility issues have the potential to be solved by the use of these digital tools. They can help to reduce barriers and costs to accessing and providing data and advice. And we are finding that when we're piloting these technologies, having a narrow focus on the initial sort of iteration or the initial versions of these technologies is important. Last thing is I'll talk about is that while we see a lot of benefits, we really have to be very aware of the unintended consequences and some of the concerns those raise. We should never forget that these tools often will not replace the work of a live person, a qualified professional who's working with clients. That one-on-one contact is important. Ideally, those tools enhance or complement that experience, but there is a tendency for some people to think that they will replace those. Certainly, in terms of for those who don't have access to, who don't have the right digital skills or whose digital skills aren't up to date or who have literacy issues or access to internet issues, the growing use of these technologies is going to cause increasing inequities and problems with access. So that'll widen inequities and rather than diminishing them if we're not attentive to that. And then the last one we already mentioned, we need to make sure that the people who are using these tools as professionals get the right upskilling, and that we try to eliminate as much overlap and duplication when we're using these tools. So there's really a lot of tools being put out there into the ecosystem, into the market, and we have to be really careful about how we about how we use those tools and make sure that there's not too much confusion out there, because people have to select these tools, and make sure there's information that helps them to choose the right tool and understand what its function is in their professional practice. So that's the quick overview of our presentation. Like I said, we're still learning a lot, but I'll leave it there. And if there's questions later on or in the discussion breakout rooms, we can deal with them. So thank you, Sylvia, and I guess I'll turn it over to whoever's next.
Thank you so much, Alex, for sharing those insights with us. We'll now turn it over to Ron and Laura from Magnet for their presentation.
Sorry about that. I'm just looking for the presenter mode.
If you think, I think if you click down at the bottom, Ron, the little
Yeah.
the little in the bottom right next to the, yeah, there you go.
All right. Sorry about the, oh, wrong one. Sorry about that, everyone. There we go. All right. So we're really happy to present Laura and I to everybody on the call. Laura and I come from Magnet. We work at a digital technology firm that works on Canada's only digital workforce system, community workforce system. Laura and I kind of come from workforce development. We come from community service delivery. So we've worked in service organizations. And one of the big things that made us join Magnet is based on our experience, we really kind of wanted to kind of be able to help create tools that could help frontline service providers. So that's kind of one of the reasons we're at Magnet. Laura, do you want to give a little background about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ron. As Ron said, I do have a background in community services in a bunch of different capacities, as a consultant, as a service delivery person, as an ancillary sort of support person in organizations that provide frontline services. And some of the research projects I've had the privilege to work on in the past decade or so have focused specifically on how highly barriered people in the labor force and just in the service delivery sector in general have to access digital tools. So I'm really excited to share some of the learnings that we've had at Magnet and outside of that as well today with you guys.
Yeah, one thing about this presentation that we prepared, it's kind of an overview of kind of Laura's and I's just experience working in the sector, basically our insights of like, what are some of the day-to-day ground realities of working and using technologies, and what are some kind of practices, or what are some things that we think would be useful to the people in the field. So just, I think before we say like, hey, adopting, it's like, why are we adopting technologies, or why bother? And I think there's two things. One, there's the changing needs of our clients. I remember working in service delivery where, you know, just from example, they said like, you know, maybe we want people to be able to book an appointment online, and they said, you know, people aren't really ready for that. People don't want to book an appointment. And we operate in spaces where somebody would have to physically walk in a location, you know, meet somebody, then ask to book an appointment, leave, and then come back the next day and book an appointment. So there's just even some simple things about program delivery where, you know, clients changing, people expect to, you know, use tools like elsewhere else in society, and we have to make our services more accessible. So that's kind of some basic things that, you know, why we have to maybe embrace digital technologies. And then one thing, the clients require digital skills in work and society. So, you know, our service have to reflect that. So if they're going to go in the workforce, they're going to have to use digital skills, and they're going to do that. One example I can talk about is, you know, we worked on an older worker program where, you know, a lot of the older workers weren't using technology, and we made a strategic decision. Should we leave technology in the program or should we not? And one of the things we thought about, and should they be able to work remotely? Should we do those things? And one of the things we realized is that in the world of work, they're going to have to use technology. So that program has to bridge those things. So, you know, we have to prepare our clients, and we also have to prepare ourselves. And one thing when I think about clients from an organizational level, or being a staff member in a frontline service delivery organization, is staff, you know, they also want to use technology. They also want to work in organizations that use technology. They don't want to go work for an organization that's kind of operating on Excel sheets and everything is really frustrating, and they don't use technology effectively. So, from a staff perspective and retaining staff and building staff and having sure you have a good organizational culture, using technology is imperative. And I think there's one thing about in nonprofits, we do a lot of reporting, we do a lot of note taking, we do a lot of things, and there's a lot of like duplications. And some of it's not on the onus of the organization. It's a lot of government reporting that's kind of made like things kind of duplicate and kind of unproductive. But there are some ways where, from basically on our experience, if you look at the workflow and you kind of find the right technology, you can improve organizational effectiveness and you can reduce time on like some of the unproductive tasks. And ultimately, it's about improving the outcomes of our services. I mean, we have to use technology. It's just another tool to just improve the outcomes of our services. So, like Alex said, are there assessment tools we can use? My team, especially if we focus on building labor market tools, can we use labor market information to inform skills development, to inform our curriculums, to inform our training programs, to inform our employment outcomes? How can we use it to really give our clients and our services like a competitive edge in this changing workforce? And I think ultimately, we're in the human services. The clients, as we see, they're human and they require humans. And like that's the people who enter the field want to be in human services and deliver kind of services to people. But we have to figure out, where and how humans can most effectively support our clients. And then where can technology be used to support and complement these activities? So I think it's really that balance. I'm going to hand it over to Laura to talk about some of the constraints we've experienced or we've kind of come across working in frontline.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. So some of this Alex will have touched on in the first part of the presentation, but I'm just going to explore this a little bit more from the perspective of these relational, like human services, and take the opportunity to talk about this a bit from the frame of our client outcomes and needs, looking at how more highly barriered clients might be better supported by a system that incorporates digital technology, and where those differentiations between the sorts of barriers clients face actually really do matter. We know that for a lot of frontline agencies, client-facing agencies, limited IT capacity is a reality. They may not have an IT team. They probably don't have an IT team. This is partly a joke, but relying on the youngest intern in the office to be the tech-savvy one who can kind of support whatever tech might currently exist or might be introduced. I know I personally have been in scenarios where I've been using software that could be, decades old and having to use that in an organizational ecosystem that is kind of fragmented, and that can be a challenge. There's also a lack of tools designed for service delivery use cases. And to kind of unpack that, the reality is that a lot of the digital tools out there were often developed outside of the non-for-profit or public sector, and for very different use cases. And when the outcome of your work are client outcomes, that informs the use cases that you have and the way technology needs to support and enhance your services. So there's that barrier that nonprofits and the public sector face as well. We also have very complex use cases and configuration needs that can change on the whim of a grant. It can change based on changing client needs and turnover in the organization. And you often require multiple tools that can fragment the digital infrastructure. So like Ron kind of gave an example, there's appointment booking tools. You can have reporting tools that are mandated either by the government or by professional regulation. You could also be forced to use a CMS that's older. There's all of these different moving parts, or sometimes kind of very static parts that come into play. We've got funder requirements. So like I said, those mandated tools and systems and rigorous data requirements. So sometimes you'll have a small agency dealing with pretty laborious reporting requirements without the digital tools to support that. There's also limited short-term resources. So something that Ron and I have witnessed, and I'm sure folks on this call have witnessed too, is that there are smaller organizations who have been strapped for funding and resources for probably a long time and have never had the luxury really of making digital decisions or decisions about their digital infrastructure that can really look beyond the time frame of a grant or a program that they're delivering right then and there, which makes it hard to plan in advance and can really limit the technology that's implemented to the programmatic scope, as opposed to maybe the scope of what works well for the organization and the clients more broadly and outside of a specific program. And of course, there's the COVID-19 pandemic and the shift to digital. We've talked about that a bit, so I won't spend too much time on that, but we know that some of the innovations aren't new. They didn't come out in the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm thinking specifically about, digital counseling or virtual counseling for folks in rural and remote spaces who might need to access, specialist healthcare services in an urban center. So these tools have been emerging, but the COVID-19 pandemic obviously accelerated that shift quite a bit. So then we'll get into the types of technology. Got organizational and operational tools, so finance tools, office software that most folks use, like Microsoft Suite. File sharing tools, so maybe Google Docs or whatever else is out there, or that someone is forced to use or able to use. HR systems. Then we have programmatic operational tools, like your CRMs, your contact relation management systems, note systems. If you're in counseling, there are different note systems that you might have to use, and those can be shaped and restricted by government mandates or professional regulations. There's data visualization tools like business intelligence tools, labor market information tools. And then in the service delivery tools, the things that are actually client facing, got websites, social media, learning management systems, or online learning tools, to be more specific, assessment tools, career pathing tools, and everything else included there in that list of examples. Obviously, there's some overlap in those tools, but for the most part, they can be quite fragmented in their implementation. As much as they may overlap in terms of how they're used, the way they're implemented can also often be fragmented. Can we go to the next slide?
Yeah.
Okay, on to you, Ron. Thanks.
All right, so I think Laura had this great idea, like the issue is a fragmentation. So you have all these different tools, and really, like, what I would say, or like what I've seen now, is the big thing is this is an ongoing upkeep. Technology tools is going to be like what I would put the analysis. It's like maintaining a home, and sometimes you're going to have to do major renovations where you're going to have to like gut your actual case management system or your CRM. And that's going to be a massive digital project, which like underlines all your organizational data, where you're going to have to spend planning and implementing and spend a lot of time on making some decisions. Sometimes there's like you're just doing something different, but it's a little bit connected. Sometimes you're just getting a new appliance. It's something you can just plug in, you can take it out. It's not a big thing, but it's really, in terms of like running a technology in an organization, it's like running a house. And it's now part of service delivery and ongoing operations. And every organization, it's something that like usually or typically or before it was something kind of just something that was on the side, but it really has to be seen as part of service delivery and part of organizational delivery and part of ongoing operations. And really, like, given that there's, as Laura said, there's so many different types of tools, where do you even start? How do you prioritize? And it's really about balancing the immediate needs and the long-term strategy for your organizations. And that boils down to your staff and clients, right? There's certain things that I would think about as the major pain points of an organization. If you're dealing with our staff or experiencing an issue every day, or there's something that could really benefit your clients. So it's really about balancing those two things and like, what do we actually do? What tools should we pick? When should we do that? You have to kind of really think about that strategically and plan on an ongoing basis and check in with the staff. How much time are they spending on certain things? What tools are effective? What tools aren't effective? What would be really useful moving back for clients, like for your clients, or what would be really useful moving forward? So there's no like, hey, there's one tool or one package that's going to meet all your needs, but really it's a compilation of many different tools and how to think about that and how to balance the priorities and needs for your organization and your clients and your staff. So here's some considerations, which kind of, Laura and I put together based on like what we've seen working in Frontline, what we've seen working on projects at Magnet and working on that. I think one of the key is really understanding your business processes and workflows. Because really, like any part of service delivery, it has to be embedded into the actual delivery of your service. So it might sound nice to just like, let's get this tool or let's get that, but really think about like, how is this going to be embedded into my service delivery? And then understanding where those requirements are, because, you know, when you're picking out a technology or checking out things, there could be something that like a data point or certain data things that you couldn't collect in the system. And then somebody has to keep something manual on the side of the books that could really like just on a day-to-day basis, really set you back and really be laborious when you could find some other technology tool that may be able to collect the data. So really figuring out those requirements and spending time on those requirements. It's like what a carpenter says, measure twice and cut once. You know, really spend time looking at those requirements, looking at your workflows, doing something before you implement something, right? When you're going to implement a new technology, really think about, you know, how does this fit into my service delivery and what are my clients? And then really figuring out, that's from like kind of a programmatic thing, figuring out like what works for your clients, what are their needs, how are they changing, what would they want in the schools, what are your focus areas for your organization? You know, is it LMS? What type of LMS would they need? What type of courses are we going to do? What things would lend itself well online? What things would lend itself on in human? Like what really works for your clients? And then I think one of the big things is their investments. And I know everybody, and Laura mentioned about some of the limitations and constraints and about capacity. And I've even been in organizations where it's like, should we invest in Salesforce and the seeding costs this much, or should we do this and should we do that? But like, you know, sometimes it's their investments and we have to think strategically, and it is a bit of a risk. You have to take those bold steps, but you know, if you get some cheaper product that may be limited, then maybe down the road you're paying for it. So you kind of got to think about weighing all those costs, and like organizationally, you know, you got to make at a certain point, you have to make certain commitments to certain tools that are going to be core to your organization, and then make those investments, spend time on the implementation, the training, the packet, the planning and everything, and really make sure they work well. You know, technology implementations, about 66% of them fail. So it's not like nonprofits are unique to this. Nonprofits are just often, or small businesses are even underly resourced. So it's even harder for them to make we don't have an implementation team and you don't have some of these things. So really think through how do you actually go about implementing? What are your requirements? And see them as investments, and think about like the long-term thing. This is not something that I'm purchasing for or putting in for 6 months, that there's certain things that I'm going to use on my ongoing service delivery. The other thing is consultants. Often like your staff don't have the skills or don't have that. You like think through your requirements, think through your configurations, think through about all that stuff so you can outsource that stuff if you have the resource to do that, and really think through your use cases. And then there's, you know, the nonprofit discounts like TechSoup. There's some other things like that where you can get those nonprofit discounts. You can figure out what technology packages and, you know, what works for best for your company or your organization. So that's kind of it. You know, I could share some I can talk about some of the examples Magnet's doing, and you know, we're working on so many different tools, and we have labor market information, but we're using labor market information, LMS systems, but it's really about what you need, what your organization needs, and what your clients need, and where you are in your journey. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.